So today we're going to look at some techniques that you could use to make your writing more descriptive. We're going to start by looking at the wrong way to write a descriptive passage. This passage is about the city at night. I walked down the city street at midnight on a Saturday. This was the main part of town for pubs and nightclubs, and there was a lot of loud music. There were also a lot of people who had consumed alcohol walking in the area. As it was November and the temperature was low, I was sorry that I had forgotten my coat. We will now look at why this passage doesn't really work as a descriptive piece and what we could do to turn it into a success. Well, one thing that doesn't really work in this passage is the choice of verbs and adjectives. The writer has chosen weak verbs and adjectives that don't really create a picture in the reader's mind. When we talk about the music, we just say there was music. Similarly, when we talk about the people in the area, they are walking in the street after consuming alcohol. The fact that we have used weak verbs and adjectives makes the piece of writing uninteresting and boring. What could we do to improve the writing? Well, we could add stronger verbs and adjectives. For example, we could say the air throbbed with music and talk, or that the revellers crowded the pavement, spilling messily onto the street. Another thing this piece of writing fails to do is it fails to engage the reader's senses. We tell the reader that the music was loud, but we don't really suggest what that might sound like, and we tell the reader the temperature was low, but we don't really suggest what that might feel like. In order to engage the reader's senses, we need to use the 5 senses to create vivid images for them. It is a good technique to try and include as many of the 5 senses as possible in your description. In fact, it is a good technique to fuse 2 senses together in the same image. For example, the spicy aroma of a kebab shop wafted through the frosty air. Another way that this piece of writing falls down is that the details we have chosen to describe the scene are not particularly engaging or interesting for the reader. They are not well chosen details. Stephen King commented on how a good description usually consists of a few well chosen details that can stand for everything else. We could improve this by choosing more interesting details. The loud music and the drunk people are too obvious. A detail we could include maybe would be the smug regulars who walk past the queue and get nodded in by the bouncers. If we had to sum up all the mistakes that this piece of writing makes in one sentence, it would be that the writing is telling the reader without showing them. Good writing will always show the reader rather than tell them what a scene is like. In order to show the reader rather than tell them, we need to create some vivid imagery that will make or create a picture in their mind. For example, when we are describing colours, it is a good idea to add some precise colours to a description. For example, don't just say brown or black, be specific. For example, if you were to write, despite the winter weather, many of the revellers were teak brown and mahogany from tanning products. Another technique we could use to create vivid images is to employ contrast. Contrasts engage the reader because they are interesting. For example, we could write, there were hundreds of pairs of eyes, some drunken and relaxed, others scanning the crowd on the lookout for their prey. A final technique that is very effective for creating vivid images is to use either a simile or a metaphor. Similes or metaphors are comparisons that make the scene more relatable to the reader. For example, we could write, "The taxis beep furiously at the revellers who launch themselves in front of their bonnets as reckless as toddlers on a sugar high."